Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 138 and week 24 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. So we're in chapters 45 and 46 for this podcast. And it's called The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions. Warning, there is discussion about rape during this podcast. Summary. Brianna is pregnant. She doesn't know who the father is. The pirate raped her days after being handfasted to Roger. She recovered Claire's gold wedding ring. Roger is near Fraser's Ridge. His horse and supplies were stolen. He was on foot without a weapon. He is met in the clearing by two men. A case of mistaken identity will possibly prove deadly for him. Inside the chapters. Chapter 45. 50-50. Brianna and Claire were foraging in the woods. Claire was also teaching Brianna important landmarks not altered by the seasons. Claire watched Brianna and wondered what was causing her inner turmoil. This was a planned trip into the forest so that Claire could get Brianna alone. The cabin was full of people coming and going. Claire found the perfect time to ask Brianna what was on her mind. She could still read Brianna's mind and asked her how pregnant she is. She was 2 months pregnant. As Claire looked into Brianna's eyes, she could see the child within all grown up and relieved to share the burden. The thought of Roger startled Claire. Then she told Brianna she had to go back through the stones. She was confused. Going through the stones was a terrible thing. I took a deep breath, feeling a dozen different emotions collide. Concern for Bree, fear for Roger, a terrible sorrow for Jamie, who would have to give her up again so soon, and for myself. You can go through pregnant, we know that much, because I did it with you. But honey, you can't take a baby through that. You can't, I ended helpless. You know what it's like. It had been 3 years since I came through the stones, but I recalled the experience vividly. Her eyes went black as the little blood remaining in her face drained away. You can't take a child through, I repeated, trying to get myself under control, think logically. It would be like jumping off Niagara Falls with a baby in your arms. You'll have to go back before it's born, or... I broke off, making calculations. It's almost November. Ships won't make the passage between late November and March, and you can't wait till March. That would mean making a 2-month trip across the Atlantic. 6 or 7 months pregnant. If you didn't deliver on the ship, which would likely kill you or the baby or both, you'd still have to ride 30 miles to the circle and then make the passage. Find your way to help on the other side. Brianna, you can't do it. You have to go now, as soon as we can manage. Brianna is worried she cannot go to the right time with Roger in the 18th century. Claire was adamant about them all guessing how the stones worked. But you and Roger are both only guessing, I argued. And so was bloody Gailey Duncan. You might not need either gemstones or a strong attachment. In the old fairy tales, when people go inside a fairy's den and then return, it's always 200 years. Claire realized Brianna had already thought about going back. There might be another way, Hispaniola, Abandawe. Claire explained why she had been to the cave. Claire thought she could feel Geillis' gaze upon her sometimes. Claire asked how Brianna got pregnant. There wasn't any pretense of not knowing what I was talking about. She gave me a straight look, one eyebrow raised. "You're the doctor. How many ways are there?" I gave her back the look with interest. "Didn't you even think of taking any precautions?" She glowered, thick brows drawn down. "I wasn't planning to have sex here." I clutched my head, digging my fingers into my scalp in exasperation. "You think people plan it? Good God, how many times did I come to that school of yours and give talks about?" "All the time, every year. My mother, the sex encyclopedia. Do you have any idea how mortifying it is to have your own mother standing up in front of everybody drawing pictures of penises?" Oh my goodness gracious. I would likely be that mother. "I must not have done it all that well," I said tartly, "since you seem not to have recognized one when you saw it." Her face jerked toward me, blood in her eye. But then she relaxed when she saw that I was joking, or trying to. "Right. Well, they look different in 3D. Taken unawares, I laughed. After a moment's hesitation, she joined me, a hesitant giggle. "You know what I mean. I gave you that prescription before I left." She looked down her long, straight nose at me. "Yes, and I was never so shocked in my life. You thought I'd run right out and have sex with everybody in sight the minute you left." "You're implying that it was only my presence stopping you?" The corner of her wide mouth twitched. "Well, not only that," she conceded, "but you had something to do with it, you and Daddy, I mean. I wouldn't have wanted to disappoint you." Then the twitch had turned to a quiver in an instant, and I hugged her hard, her smooth, bright hair against my cheek. "You couldn't be, baby," I murmured, rocking her slightly. "We'd never be disappointed in you. Never." At the core of Brianna's worries was how Jamie would react to her pregnancy. Claire reassured her it would be okay, and there was still time to find Roger. Then Brianna dropped a bombshell. She said the baby wasn't Roger's. On that interesting note, Brianna pulled something from her pocket and handed it to Claire. "Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ!" The worn gold wedding band sparked in the sun, and my hand closed reflexively over it. It was warm from being carried next to her skin, but I felt a deep coldness seep into my fingers. "Bonnet?" I said. "Stephen Bonnet?" That was a game changer. She hadn't planned on telling them after hearing about the robbery on the river by Bonnet. She told Claire the story even though she didn't want to. She recalled how she went to the Gloriana during the day thinking it would be safer. Bonnet was fresh-shaven, but his clothes were dirty and been worn since the day prior. He paid her a compliment about her looks. She immediately asked about the ring and if he would sell it to her because it reminds her of a ring her mother had. He was a big man and hid something behind his eyes when she asked where he got the ring. He took her by the hand and led her to his cabin. He offered her brandy and claimed the ring was a love token. Bree is relieved to know her mother is alive and well. Unfortunately, Bonnet has a different payment in mind for the ring. "I've enough money, sweetheart," he said. "What color's the hair between your legs?" She jerked her hand out of his grasp and backed up as quickly as she could, slamming into the wall of the cabin within a few steps. "You've mistaken me," she said. "I didn't mean—" "Maybe not," he said, and the edges of his teeth showed in his smile. "But I do. And I do think perhaps you've mistaken me, sweetheart." Oh, that Bonnet can be menacing. Brianna fights back. He slaps her hard and forces her to her knees. She nearly vomits as he forcibly presents her with his unwashed penis, Leroy. He forced her to perform oral sex with threats and grabbing her hard. He suddenly pushed her away, causing her to stumble and spit. He wasn't done with her yet. He grabbed her, kissed her, and roamed below her waist. She butted him in the face with her head and ran out of the room. The cook tripped her, giving Bonnet time to reach her. Back to his cabin they went for more games. She told her mother she stopped fighting after that. Except in her mind, she still fought. When someone is raped or sexually assaulted, there are several common reactions that can occur. Bree seems to be experiencing some of them. Frozen fright can happen when somebody freezes or tenses up and they can't move. It's a physiological response that we use as a survival tool in a threatening situation. Dissociation. This occurs during trauma when the mind tries to separate from the trauma occurring on the body, and the victim might focus on other details such as the person humming or the color of the comforter, if there's pictures on the wall, a clock, anything else in the room. And it's kind of like a dreamlike state. They may have memory loss, denial. They may have a hard time believing it possibly happened, or it really couldn't have been rape. Shock. They seem to be calm, as if nothing happened, but it's shock and disbelief. Guilt or self-blame. Withdrawal. They might isolate themselves from others and normal activity. Sometimes there's a change in sexual behavior. A person may stop having sex altogether or have as many encounters as possible. Destructive behaviors. Drugs or alcohol to cope, or other kind of disorders like eating disorders may develop. The other common things that can happen are anger, anxiety, depression, decreased self-worth, numbness, mood swings, muscle tension, hopelessness, shame, fear of being alone or left at home are among them. I wanted to go over the different things that could be reactions to a sexual assault or a rape, because I know that many of us, and probably many of you who are listening, have been raped or sexually assaulted. And you're not alone. And there's nothing that Brianna could have done in this book, and there's nothing you could have done, whether you knew the person or not. We don't make somebody rape us. We don't make somebody sexually assault us. It has nothing to do with the time of day, the clothes we're wearing, if we've had any alcohol, if we know the person or not. Like Brianna tried to say that she was sorry for leading him on in so many words. She didn't lead him on. She had no idea, because she didn't know him, that he would expect sex as payment for that ring. And I know many of us have found ourselves in situations that we could not have predicted. And she tried to be safe, but it wasn't enough. Going there by herself was untenable. She would have had to have had a male with her that could have maybe possibly prevented it. Probably not. because all the men on the ship could have clobbered the guy and he could have still taken Brianna, right? It's his ship. It was definitely not neutral ground where they met on. It only took him a couple of minutes and it was over, along with his incessant humming. She was frozen in place, then he rolled off of her, leaving her dazed. He made a comment that tells us he doesn't think he did anything wrong. He told her the ring was on the desk, as was money. She is affronted he is offering to pay her. He told her to help herself to what was on the desk because she was worth it, and promptly left. Her hand shook, preventing her from picking up the ring from the bowl, so she poured the contents into her pocket and walked out. So let's take a breath for a moment. Again, Brianna tried to be safe, but she was unable to prevent what took place. Even if she would have had a weapon, he was stronger and bigger than her. She couldn't have stopped him by herself. This is an all too common reality for many women. One of the things we're going to talk about as well is the likelihood of her getting pregnant from this encounter versus being with Roger. Brianna had tried to pretend it didn't happen. It had been 2 days since she had sex with Roger multiple times. They used the withdrawal method, which is also called coitus interruptus, or as I call it, pull and pray. And I put a link for that type of birth control, or pregnancy prevention, in the post. And in reality, it's about as effective as using condoms. But also with condoms, there's a lot of user error. They can be anywhere from 6% effective, all the way down to something like 78%, maybe even a little bit less, depending on how they're used. So, withdrawal can prevent pregnancies, sometimes. Claire said people who used that method were called parents. But part of the issue with withdrawal method actually being as effective as a condom is that the timing of the male partner has to be flawless. The pre-ejaculate generally doesn't have any sperm in it. But what if he waits just a smidge too long? I don't know about you. Orgasm, brain, clear thinking, that's a tough one. I don't have a penis, so I don't really know exactly how hard it is to be flawless in timing. Maybe I'll ask around. The other thing that must happen is he must ejaculate away from her genitals, into a towel, onto a belly. I know this is very explicit, but that's the reality of it. People think it's fine. I personally, or I guess professionally, do not like when this is someone's method of birth control. And the other part of it is if there are multiple encounters in, I don't know, say a night, that he has to wash the head of his penis before the next encounter, because there could be a little bit left behind. A drop of semen has how much sperm in it? I don't know. On average, I'd have to look it up, but it's enough to get somebody pregnant. Or if his aim isn't great and he ejaculates and some of it gets on her outer labia, guess what? That can still get up in there and get her pregnant. So, Did Roger wash off his penis between the several encounters they had? I'd have to go back and count, but I think it was 4 times in a night. There's a pretty good chance he didn't wash. So, there's that to think about. So there's kind of your lesson on withdrawal method. So Brianna is traumatized by the rape. She is worried about Roger not returning. She is worried about who the father is. She really didn't have the best entrance into sexual activity, given the fight she and Roger had afterward, and then the rape a couple of days later. This is a mind mess for Brianna. And then she finds herself pregnant. So now she not only has to process her and Roger being handfasted and not telling anybody, the fact that she was raped, the fact that she is pregnant, and she's in the 18th century, and she's not married in anybody's eyes that they know of. Oh, that's a whole bag of mess, isn't it? She has a lot going on. No wonder she looks distressed when Claire tries to read her mind. Chapter 46, Comes a Stranger. This is a very difficult chapter for me. Very difficult. It caused a lot of anxiety for me to even approach it. Besides Brianna sharing her being raped by Stephen Bonnet and giving her mother the ring, now we have to deal with Roger's situation. Roger was in fact on his way to Fraser's Ridge. He stopped for a drink of water at a spring. He was annoyed because his horse gun, a bit of food, and water had been stolen when he was at the mill. His clothes were a mess, and he was not clean-shaven because the razor had been in his saddlebag. He was only worried about what Brianna thought of him. Claire and Jamie were not on his radar of concern. He hoped she would forgive his betrayal of not telling her about the death notice and the fight and all the things. His thoughts ran wild. Stupid in underestimating her stubbornness. Stupid not to have been honest with her, he amended. Stupid to have bullied her into secrecy. Trying to keep her safely in the future. No, that hadn't been stupid at all, he thought, with a grimace at the things he'd seen and heard in the last few months. Roger was temporarily removed from his thoughts by birds dive-bombing him. He had ventured too close to a nest. He hoped the encounter with the ravens was not a bad omen, as Scots folklore depicts. Remember way back when Jamie fired that gun when Jenny was in labor? That's how serious the mythology is, and the concern and superstition, and it brought the redcoats down on his head. He then thought about how exciting it was here, seeing history firsthand. Only for Brianna did he have regret. He placed a hand over his pocket. He had stolen 2 gems from Stephen Bonnet. Of course, he didn't know those had been stolen from Claire and Jamie by Bonnet. And they had taken them from Geillis Duncan, or Geillis Abernathy rather, after saving young Ian at Abandawe. The girl at the mill told him he would reach Fraser's Ridge by sundown. His thoughts pestered him again. He walked. His thoughts ran inevitably ahead of him, quick with speculation. And how had it gone, Brianna's reunion with her parents? What had she thought of Jamie Fraser? Was he the man she'd been imagining for the last year, or only a pale reflection of the image she had built up from her mother's stories? At least she had a father to know, he thought. with a queer little pang at the memory of Midsummer's Eve and that burst of light in the passage through the stones. He reached the spot as it was described. His stolen horse was there. A young man had come into view with Roger's gun in hand. Hold on. Poor Roger. There was another man in the clearing who looked familiarly like Brianna, and how Claire described him. It was Jamie Fraser in all his size and fierceness. "You'll be Mr. Mackenzie," the man said. It wasn't a question. The voice was deep but not loud, barely lifted above the sound of the rustling leaves, but Roger had no difficulty hearing him. "I am," he said, taking a step forward. "And you'll be, Jamie Fraser?" He stretched out a hand, but quickly let it drop. Two pairs of eyes rested coldly on him. "I am," said the red-haired man. "You'll know me." The tone of the question was distinctly unfriendly. Roger took a deep breath, cursing his own dishevelment. He didn't know how Brianna might have described him to her father, but Fraser had evidently expected something a good deal more prepossessing. "Well, you look quite a bit like your daughter." The man gave a loud snort, but Fraser didn't look around. "And what business have you with my daughter?" Fraser moved for the first time, stepping out from the shadow of the trees. No, Claire hadn't exaggerated. He was big, even an inch or two taller than Roger himself. Roger was confused and alarmed. What had Jamie been told about him? Roger claimed to come for his wife. The situation escalated as young Ian weighed in, with gun in hand. Jamie asked for the truth. "I'll only ask the once, and I mean to hear the truth," he said, quite mildly. "Have you taken my daughter's maidenhead?" Roger felt his face grow hot as a flood of warmth washed up from chest to hairline. Christ! What had she told her father? And for God's sake, why? The last thing he had expected to meet was an infuriated father bent on avenging his daughter's virtue. It's not what you think," he blurted. "I mean, we meant to. Did ya, or no?" Fraser's face was no more than a foot away, completely expressionless save for whatever it was that burned far back in his eyes. "Look, damn it, yes, she wanted to." Fraser hit him just under the ribs. Roger doubled and staggered back, gasping from the blow. It didn't hurt yet, but he'd felt the force of it all the way to his spine. His principal feeling was one of amazement, tinged with anger. "Stop," he said, trying to get enough breath to talk. "Stop, for God's sake. I said It has gone from bad to worse for Roger. It seemed Jamie was trying to kill him. Roger fought back. He hit the man. He could feel his fist strike flesh, but it seemed to make no difference. Through his one sound eye, he could see that broad-boned face, set in eerie calm like a Viking berserker. He swung and it disappeared. Bobbed up again. He swung, grazing an ear. A blow struck him in the shoulder. He swung half around with it, recovered, and launched himself head first. "She's mine!" Roger gritted between clenched teeth. He had his arms wrapped around Fraser's body, felt the deep sprung ribs give as he squeezed. He'd cracked the bastard like a nut. "Mine, here?" They continued to brawl. Jamie was besting Roger. He tried to get Jamie to stop, but he wouldn't. Roger believed he was going to die before he was born. Indeed, a very short chapter. It seems Jamie is working out more than anger about Brianna on Roger. His rape, perhaps? Since Brianna and Claire had told Jamie Roger's last name was Wakefield, Mackenzie was a whole different person, according to Lizzie. What a horrific mess. This is one of Jamie's biggest mistakes in all the books, in my opinion. He acted without talking to Brianna or Claire. He reacted instead of making sure he had full and true information. It is a prime example of how clear communication matters. Brianna's good intention to get the ring back brought a hellish nightmare to her in the form of Stephen Bonnet. Jamie's desire to protect his daughter placed Roger in hell. Unexpectedly, too. Jamie's actions also continued Brianna's living hell of Roger not returning. The ramifications will undoubtedly go far and wide. This is a very disputed topic, I think, in the books. Some people think it was totally fine what he did. Like, I understand through the lens of the cultural, historical point of view here, but Jamie was completely reactionary. They told Lizzie to lie about where they were going. They completely set him up and didn't give him any opportunity to say who he was and explain how all of this came to be. And because of that, there's ripples. I mean, all he could have said was, did Roger go by any other names? I mean, Brianna's using Fraser, not Randall. So this little piece infuriates me because of how the setup was done. It's one of the things in all the books that gets under my skin tremendously. And it's not all the things that happened afterward. I just wish it just wasn't this glaring thing to me. Like, that it's a glaring plot device in my face. And there may have been other ways in order to have it happen instead of having Jamie, beating the hell out of him and threatening him and possibly killing him, right? It's rough. So thank you for bearing with me. Next, we are going to do chapters 47 and 48. And I always want your feedback. Please email me at contact@adramaofoutlander.com or call the listener line at 719-425-9444. Let me know what you think. Ask me questions. Give me feedback. I do want to give a little shout out to Kelly. She sent in a pretty large donation to me this week to offset the costs of Denver Comic-Con and doing the panel. Is wonderful. And I want to also thank Stacy from Random House for supplying the book giveaway for the panel, and it was awesome. I will be posting a podcast of the panel. It was recorded, so I have it to make into a proper podcast format. Eventually, the video will be released as well, but the podcast portion is what I do. Courtney will deal with the video portion later. It is not transcribed, so you do have to listen to the podcast in order to know what happened at the panel. But it was a lot of fun. I got to take a picture with Lotta Verbeek and with Graham McTavish and get autographs by them on my panel badge, which is really great. They're wonderful people, kind and generous and just wonderful to meet. Graham is very funny, and we sat in his panel that he did, and he just gushed over Agif and his love of the Gaelic and teaching it to them. Yeah. So it was a great time. There'll be more on that when I do the intro and outro for the panel podcast. How can you be involved with the Dram of Outlander? Besides leaving me a message or sending me an email, you can follow on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander without the A in front. The website is adramofoutlander.com. I know, shocking. And the Facebook page is A Dram of Outlander, as well as the group. The group on Facebook is for you to interact, to talk to each other, because everybody can see your posts. On the page, it's really driven by me, and it's difficult to interact with each other unless you're responding to something I post. So, on the group, you have to ask to join so I can make sure you are a real person. You are an actual Outlander fan, and you're not a bot or some troll from the interwebs. And the other way that, of course, you can support the podcast is share it, share it, share it. Have your friends come and join the group. Send them to the website. Share the link to the podcast. You could go into iTunes through Apple Podcasts and leave a review. The more 5-star reviews I get, the easier it is for people to find me. On Google Play, you can also leave a review and other streaming sites as well. So please do that. I appreciate you. It takes just a moment to do it. And if that's how you're listening, please leave it for me. And I thank you for being so patient. I know it's been a couple of weeks since the podcast was up. It's been crazy. And we're going to keep on until we finish this book. And I'm going to do my best to get 2 podcasts out next week, because this week will be this one and the Comic-Con podcast. And then next week we'll do the next 2, and then we'll be caught up. Woohoo! It's exciting. So I thank you for sticking out with me, for walking along with me in this path, and until next time, Aslan Java.